So this game I knew by name long before I actually found out what it was, and in fact, for a long time I thought it was a fighting game for some reason. I don't know why, but I remember seeing one of the characters of this game on the front of a magazine and thinking to myself, oh yes, that's that character from that game. And I was thinking, yep, that fighting game, I think it probably is. But it wasn't until the childcare centre where they actually had a copy of this game there, and I actually got to play it for myself and see what it was actually like, and I was very interested to see what it was like, and I am glad that I did find out. And I did soon after get this game for myself, and this game is one that is known for its popularity, although I think a lot of that is rather manifested rather than genuine. I do believe this game does have a lot of strong fans, but I think the degree of it is mostly just something that people accept is true, but from my experience it's not as true as people make it out to be. But my fifth favourite game of all time is Final Fantasy VII, and I played this after Final Fantasy VIII, and I did know what Final Fantasy VIII was when I played it at the childcare centre, and so I was playing it trying to think about it in terms of Final Fantasy VIII rules, because I wasn't really familiar with the rest of the series at this point. I remember playing the opening mission where you have Cloud and Barret, and one of the first things that really struck me was the graphics, and one of the big things I thought to myself is, wow, these characters look a lot like characters from Poi Poi. And I know people like to make a big deal about how blocky they are or whatever, but really that's just the case for any 3D game as time goes on. You know, technology gets more advanced, you can go into further detail with the textures and the polygons get smaller, that's just the way it is. And does this affect the quality of the game? Absolutely not. This is a fantastic game. But yes, because I was used to Final Fantasy VIII rules and I was playing the game and I was casting the Bolt and Ice spell with Cloud, and I saw the number next to it, which was the MP cost, I thought that was how many of that spell I had, because I was thinking in Final Fantasy VIII terms. But I did eventually get the game for myself, and I have strong memories of playing this game in the back room in winter with a cup of hot chocolate, which I also did with Final Fantasy VIII at that time. And the things that blew me away about Final Fantasy VIII were still present in 7. But let's talk about the mechanics, because that's the big important thing that really matters. So, similar to Final Fantasy VIII, each character doesn't really have much to differentiate them, which is fine. I know people have a big issue with that, but I think it's absolutely fine. What does differentiate the characters are their stats, their weapons, and their limit breaks. Limit breaks being a special attack that you can unleash once they've been damaged so much, and you just get more powerful ones as you use them and as you defeat enemies. But the main customization system of this game is the materia system. So each piece of equipment that you will have, apart from the accessories, will have materia slots on them, up to 8, and they can be linked in pairs of 2. So, for example, you might have something with 2 single slots, or you might have one with a pair of 2, and then 2 separate single slots. Or at the highest degree, you might have 4 pairs of 2 linked together. And basically, the materia that you have contained all the abilities that you'll be using throughout the game. So you'll have green materia, which is your magic materia. So you will have, for example, the lightning materia, which at its first level can cast the first level of Bolt. Then once you've got enough AP for that particular materia by killing enemies with it equipped, it will level up so that you can then have access to Bolt 2 as well as the initial Bolt. And if you get a materia mastered, that means that you learn all the abilities on it and you then get more AP so that it reaches its final level. You will get a duplicate materia with 0 AP on it. So you get a lightning materia to max, you will get a brand new lightning materia at level 1 with no AP. And this means that you can just keep getting any amount of materia. If you have one of a materia, you can have as many as you want, you just got to keep working on leveling them up. In almost all cases, that is. But as for other colours, you also have the yellow materia, which is like your command, so This is stuff like stealing and the ability to throw items or sense enemies to get their stats, and this includes even some of the high-end, high-level ones such as the W item and W summon, which lets you summon your summons twice or use items twice in a row. There's also the purple materia, which is kind of like your passive skill, so you equip them and they will activate on their own accord. So you'll have like counter attack, which will cause whoever has it equipped to attack an enemy when they get hit, or you'll have your basic like HP plus and speed plus and all that lot. The red materia is like your summons, and leveling them up just means that you'll be able to summon them more times in a battle. And the most interesting materia type, I think, is the blue materia, where if you equip that in a slot that's connected to another slot, it will add a sort of effect to it. So for example, the all materia in fire will allow you to cast fire on all of your enemies. But the blue materia tends to fall into two separate categories. There's the blue materia that adds an extra effect to your character or something that happens when you cast the connected spell or use the connected ability or whatever. And then you have the other type of blue materia which will add extra conditions to using the combined materia. So for example, the blue materia sneak attack, if you connect that with something, then that character will use that straight off the bat when the battle starts. So if you, for example, combine sneak attack with the restore materia, they will instantly heal, that type of thing. And then the same applies for like final attack, where they will cast it once something kills them. But then you also have the ones that add extra effects, like I mentioned before with the all materia, but you'll also have the elemental materia, which if you combine it with a materia of a certain element, then that will either give your attack power or defense a particular element based on whether it's equipped to your weapon or your armor. And the same applies for added effects when it comes to status effects. What's really interesting about this is that you can stack these effects. So say if you have two fire materia, you can equip them both in individual slots and pair each one of them with a different blue materia. So for example, you might have one with MP absorb, which will allow you to gain some MP when you cast it, and you can have the other one with quadra magic, which will allow you to cast it 4 times. So that combination basically means that when you cast that spell, you can cast it 4 times and recover a bit of MP every time you do that. Each piece of equipment also has a growth rate, so most pieces of equipment will have a normal growth rate, but you'll have some without any growth, and then you'll have some with double growth, which means the materia on it will level up twice as fast. And then there's a couple of weapons in the game with triple growth, which means they'll grow 3 times as fast. The amount of different combinations and things that you can come up with is really amazing, and it really allows you to come up with all sorts of different crazy strategies for things. Such as in the battle arena, for example, you play as a single character, so one thing that I like to do when I'm playing in the battle arena is I like to give a character counter attack, but I also like to give them added effect and poison, which means that whenever they attack an enemy, they have a chance of poisoning them. And of course, you'd have to equip that onto your weapon. But also the yellow materia death blow, which is basically like a really powerful but inaccurate attack. I like to combine that with the blue added cut, which means that whenever you use death blow, even if you miss, you will then do an additional attack, and of course because you have the added effect on your attack with poison, it grants you another opportunity to poison the enemy. So certain things work in certain combinations, and there are certain combinations that you can come up with if you grind enough and if you do enough side quests where you become so powerful it's incredible, like the yellow mine materia, which will allow you to copy whatever the previous action was at no MP cost, and you can mix them with all sorts of crazy blue materia to get all sorts of crazy effects. Like for example, you could have the counter, that is the blue counter materia with mime, meaning that whenever an enemy attacks you, you will copy the last ability that you used and then say like equip 8 of those and then get Cloud to use his ultimate limit break and then be hit, so that then he'll unleash his ultimate limit break another 8 times. That's an extreme example, but that's the type of thing that you can do. I should also probably mention that on top of all this you can fuse materia, and materia fusion, the way that that works is that you reach a point in the game where you get access to the master materia, and what that means is that if you max out one copy of all of the materia of a particular category, although this doesn't necessarily fall with all categories, but say for example the green materia, the magic materia, if you have at least one massive copy of each materia in the green coloured category, then you can fuse them all together to create a singular Master Magic materia, which is a singular materia with all magic on it. And of course this cuts down on your flexibility as you can't divide these abilities up, but it will allow you to pile on a bunch of effects with the blue materia, although saying that the blue materia that is, that would add a extra condition for casting won't work because it doesn't have a particular magic spell to reference. It's very, very interesting and I absolutely love Final Fantasy VII. So this is a game that I had never seen before. I saw someone bring it to the childcare centre, and when I found out about what it was, I was very curious to see what it was like. And when I saw this game, I was rather mind blown in a rather unusual way because what I saw felt really, really strange to me at the time. I mean, now it feels completely normal, but at the time it felt really, really strange. And I remember there was someone at this childcare centre called James who he was playing it and I was asking him questions about how things worked and stuff. And he wasn't very far in this game, I don't think, so I don't think he really had a full understanding of how it worked. But I did eventually get it for myself on the PlayStation when it came out on the PlayStation. And this is one of those old games that never originally came out in Europe, but it did get a port to the PlayStation. And my fourth favourite game of all time is Final Fantasy VI. So basically, when I saw this game, the thing that really caught me off guard and really amazed me was this whole thing of seeing a Final Fantasy game in 2D, because it was a brand new thing to me and I had never seen a Final Fantasy game in 2D before. And because I had previously established in my own mind that because Final Fantasy VIII was such a game of the future, because I was thinking that, turn-based combat, selecting your attacks from menus was sort of like a futuristic thing to do in game design, and I thought this is the way that we're going to be seeing games developing in the future. It really did strike me as strange to see this game in 2D. And because it's like, a Final Fantasy game in 2D, and we did actually say that quite a lot, like, this is really strange, a Final Fantasy game in 2D. But there are a few features of Final Fantasy VI specifically that really stand out. For one, it has the most playable characters in any game of the series, and also it gives you the most flexibility over your party. I don't mean in terms of customizing your party as much as I mean choosing who is in your party, because you can have a party of up to 4 characters and you can choose less than 4 characters if you so desire, and you don't have to include Terra, the main character, either in that. That is when you get to these events where you don't necessarily need Terra as a part of the story. And so with this game, rather than having a huge complex system that you develop with a few characters, the complexity comes from the fact that there are many characters and you sort of have to pair them up and group them together into certain groups in ways that you think will work effectively. But there is also an element of customizing, although a lot of the customizing is long-term customizing and not so much with the short-term customizing. So the way that the characters differentiate in this game is that each character has their own single ability. That is, an ability that is specifically unique to them. So, for example, Locke can steal, Edgar can use his different tools to fight, Sabin can use Blitz, which is like a set of different button combinations to unleash special moves, which is pretty silly, I think, and all sorts. One of the main characters that stands out to me in this regard is the character of Gao, because Gao is the only character in the game who can't do regular attacks. What he does is he has 2 abilities, Leap and Rage. A leap will only be accessible in a particular area in the world, and when he leaps on enemies and when he leaps off enemies when you get him back in a later battle, he will have learned the AI patterns of all of those different enemies, and you can access a rage to trigger one of these different sets of AI. So he basically becomes that monster is the best way to describe it. And so you do have different characters that have a lot more depth with their extra abilities compared to others. So like for example, Mog will learn his dances by battling in different places, and you can dance to change the environment. And Strago will learn his laws, which is like blue magic, by witnessing it in battle. And Gao has loads of different rages, which is the one I was just talking about with the enemy scripts. And sometimes you will have characters like Cyan who will learn his different abilities through either leveling up or story events or side quests and things like that. But you also have some very, very simple examples of these abilities, such as Celis, whose ability Runic will allow her to prevent enemies from casting spells, and she will recover MP whenever they try to. So it's very simple and there's no real expansion onto that, but that's just the way it is. Now the main long form customization thing in this game is to do with the espers, which are the summons in this game, and you get a lot of espers in this game. Each character can equip one esper at a time, and each character can only summon an esper once per battle. And I really like in Final Fantasy VI how there's a lot more diversity to the espers. It's not all just elemental attacks. You do have espers that are dedicated to healing and some to remove status effects or to make all of your characters jump, that type of thing. And I really, really like that. But the biggest thing about the espers is to do with the magic that they teach you. In this game, each character has potential access to every magic spell in the game, and the way that you learn these different spells is by equipping the espers. When you defeat enemies, you will gain some AP, and the esper that that character has equipped will determine how that AP is distributed and how it is multiplied. So for example, say if you have an esper with Cure times 5 and Fire times 2, what that means is that whoever has it equipped, then them getting 1 AP will give them 5% towards Cure and 2% towards Fire. If they get that to 100%, then they have permanent access to that spell. And until they get 100%, they won't have access to that spell at all. And you do get loads of espers in this game, so there's all sorts of crazy different combinations that you can come up with. And so obviously the further through the game that you get, you will start to come across espers that will grant access to new, more powerful spells, but will also grant access to the lower spells at faster rates. So say if you have this esper early on that gives you Cure times 5 and Fire times 2, you may eventually come across an esper that will give you higher tier versions of these spells, or maybe just the same tier but at a faster rate. So it might be times 10 or something like that. And if you want to get into really, really high territory, the ultimate abilities in the game like Ultima and Quicken and all that, you will learn those very, very slowly. I'm talking like the ultimate espers at a times 1 rate. And so there's a lot to consider when distributing these different espers across all of your different characters. Now, with 14 characters, you might be thinking to yourself, well, what's the point? Why not just stick to a small team of a few characters who you can train up and ignore the rest? Well, one thing that I really love about this game is that it kind of lets you do that, but it won't punish you if you don't do that. And the reason for this is that this game introduces a split party system, and so there are times throughout the game where you will have to split up into multiple teams, and then as a result of that, you will have to utilize more characters. And there is a strategy to knowing which characters do go well together, and you would have to take into consideration their specific innate abilities as opposed to just their magic, but also their magic and their levels as well. But there is some innate variation in that as well, because there will be times where there are characters who you just don't use very often because the story hasn't had them around for long, and they will just be a total new blank slate for you to work with, which I also really, really like. And as for the later part of the game, I'm not going to spoil anything. I won't be explaining anything story-wise, but I will say that the game really does open up. And I do literally mean open up. Like, once again, I don't mean the open world type opening up where it's just a massive field to run around. No. I mean, the game does become incredibly open later on in the game. And the amount of side quests and extra missions for different characters' weapons and different espers and all sorts of different stuff towards the end of the game, there is loads of them, and it's just fantastic.